Hey, Tom, this is Chad. I'm here with a couple of special guests who want to give you just a personal welcome.
Hey, Tom, this is Jeff Serling.
This is Andrew Serling.
We just wanted to say we missed you at SerlingFest this year. Hope to see you soon, and hope you're doing well across the pond there.
You're traveling through another dimension. A dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind. A journey into a wondrous land whose boundaries are that of imagination. That's the signpost up ahead. Your next stop, the Twilight Zone.
For almost a decade now, the Rod Serling Memorial Foundation have been inviting fans of Rod Serling to celebrate his life in his hometown of Binghamton, New York at SerlingFest. But if, like me, you weren't able to make the event this year, don't worry, because now you can have SerlingFest at home. Thanks to the work of Chad Boykin, the publisher at Jobber House Press, and his friend Chris, tonight we'll be bringing you a host of interviews with various people at the convention to give us a flavour of just what we missed. So before we start, I'd like to thank Chad and Chris for getting all of these interviews. They've got a couple of hours worth of material, so I'm going to be splitting this one up into two parts. Now, for the past couple of years, SerlingFest has been held at the Forum Theatre in Binghamton, and while the presentations are happening on stage, there is also a vendor's room with people selling merchandise throughout the day. It could be Rod Serling related merchandise, or it could be authors selling signed copies of their books. And usually you'll get one or two of the Serling family milling around as well. But this isn't like Comic-Con where you get 30 seconds with the people at the table. You'll be able to actually have conversations with people there, spend some good quality time with them. So first of all, let's get a flavour of the kind of things you'll find in that vendor's room. When Chad had a conversation with two of the vendors at the event, Mary Kate Frank, who I met a couple of years ago, who was an attendee and now she is a vendor, and also a gentleman called Kerry Reagan.
Hi, I'm here with Mary Kate Frank, and we are at SerlingFest 2025 in the vendor's room, and you have something special for sale this year, a first time.
Yes, I was here last year, and I was thinking how much I would love to just have a very simple piece of apparel, like a baseball cap, with just the name Rod Serling on it, that would spark conversation with people as I walk around. You know, everyone can take them back to their hometowns, and when someone says, "Who's that?" it's a chance to talk about this great man and his legacy. Yeah, so I'm selling them for the foundation. All the proceeds go to the foundation. And on the back of the cap is the website of the foundation. So someone walking behind you knows where to go to get more information.
Fantastic. So are you a designer, or are you an artist, a clothing, are you a textile person? Like how did this all happen?
I am a writer who is a procrastinator and decided, what could I do rather than write my piece that I'm writing about Rod Serling? Well, I could start a capsule baseball cap collection. Luckily, since it's just his name, it didn't require too much designing. They were embroidered in Brooklyn, in my neighborhood. And that's what happened. It came together rather quickly. I got the permission of the foundation, and they were all for it.
Well, sometimes wonderful things happen through procrastination, because we were putting off other things.
I hope so.
And you are tabling near some musicians and poets, am I right?
That's correct. I've met a lot of people who were not here last year. As you know, last year was such a big one. But yes, there is a band sitting next to me who has an entire album of songs inspired by the Twilight Zone. So that's also making it a very festive atmosphere.
Amazing. And as a writer, how did Rod Serling inspire your writing and your path to writing?
Well, I grew up on the 24-hour marathons, as so many of us did. And it was just part of my inner vocabulary from a very young age in me, these episodes, without me even even realizing it. I returned to them a couple of years ago, started watching them again, and was amazed by how they stand the test of time and how I see them everywhere in our culture now, and some of our best entertainment. Severance, Ryan Coogler's summer blockbuster Sinners was inspired by The Last Rites of Jeff Myrtlebank, which is a rather obscure episode. So I just think that and many other things make it more relevant than ever. So, Rod Serling is someone I admire a great deal as a writer and a human being. So, yes.
Wonderful. Well, we're looking forward to today. Today's Saturday. It's the big day. Best luck at the table. And it was wonderful to meet you.
Thank you. You as well.
Thanks. Take care. All right. So I'm here, SerlingFest 2025 with Carrie Regan. And this is a really interesting table. I saw you have a player, like a YouTube player going, and CDs, and you've got some music. So can you tell me about what you've got happening over here?
Well, it's I'm in a band. Watkins and the Rapiers is the name of the band in Rochester, New York, and we have a CD that we've produced that has 14 songs, each about or inspired by an episode of the Twilight Zone, and the songs have the same titles as the episodes. So if people have favorite episodes, they can check out what our song about the episode is.
Oh, so how did this come about? What inspired this project?
One of our members, Rick McRae, trombonist and keyboardist, had an idea to, he came in with a song from the first episode, Where Is Everybody? And he kind of said, I'd like to have songs about each of the first 10 episodes of the Twilight Zone. And not everybody heard him say that, but heard that we were all going to do songs about the Twilight Zone. So we didn't actually do the first 10 episodes. We got a few of the first 10, and then other people were picking episodes from wherever. And at this point, we actually have 15 songs now because we have one that we've done since we did the CD that is not on it. So.
Fantastic. Well, is there an idea to do all 100 and 150, the whole series, all 150?
Of course there is, and we're going to be asking for Divinity to give us an extension on our life so that we can do that.
Well, you're going to need it. I can relate. And it's great that you started with the first episode, Where Is Everybody? Every time I do a book signing, that's what I say, where is everybody? Why is this place empty?
That's exactly how it goes when we play our shows.
Well,
Bada-boom.
But I bet you found your audience. How are you playing some gigs? Do you do some...
Yeah, we do. We have kind of a following in Rochester, and we're kind of a big band, 6 players and actually a 7th for the Twilight Zone because we wanted to add an extra horn player to get that good horn section sound. So that's a lot of people to pull together for gigs, and it makes scheduling gigs a little tough sometimes. But and it also has kept us kind of limited to playing the Rochester area, which is fine. We're enjoying that. So we do have. Let's see, we have a gig coming up Wednesday. We're playing the Little. I don't know when the podcast is being broadcast, but we are playing Wednesday, and another. I'll just keep going here for a second. We have we have 6 songwriters in the band. Every year we write a new Christmas song. Everybody tries to write one. So we now have what we think is a world record of more than 100 original Christmas songs, and we do quite a few Christmas shows around Rochester in December. Is another one of our fortes.
Well, if you can't get into the Guinness Book of World Records for most songs about the Twilight Zone, maybe you can get in for the most Christmas song. I mean, one of them's got to pay off.
Well, payoff is the key there because I did write to the Guinness Book of World Records. Actually, in 1989, I submitted something for a public relations client of mine and got them in the Book of World Records, so I knew how it's done. I submitted it for our Christmas songs, and their response was pay up. and then maybe you can get in. That really was what it was. You have to pay to get in for something like that. I think if you have a world record for something popular, it might get in. But if it's something that looks like there's a commercial angle to it, they're going to say, okay, you got to pay. Apparently. I mean, this was my interpretation of what they said to me, but they did say that for this kind of application, you need to pay X amount of money.
Well, my innocence is gone because I always thought that this was just a service to the world, and instead it's a pay to play.
Welcome to the real world, my friend.
Incredible. Well, this is a wonderful project, and I wish you the best of luck with it. Now, lastly, how do you recruit band members? If you said you needed a horn player, I mean, do you put an ad in the paper that says our band, it needs to get more horny, and we need a horn player? How do you do this?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the band is plenty horny as we are. but this was our other horn player. Plays in some other outfits, and he has buddies who play. So he had somebody who wanted to come in, and it was a good choice because this guy not only came in, he then started writing songs for he has one of the Twilight Zone songs, and he contributes others for the Christmas season.
Amazing.
So yeah,
I'm looking forward to listening to it.
And he's funny too. This guy.
There's a lot of overlap, right? Humor and horror and music and poetry, and now you have some poets on in your group, right? Or at least some poetry fans.
Well, we did. One thing we try, because we play a lot in Rochester, we try to make our nights special. And it's hard to make every night special, but we have various theme nights that we pull out here now and then. So one thing we've done is have a haiku night where we'll ask the members of the audience to write haiku, and we'll read them during the segment. And sometimes we have particular themes we'll ask them to write about, and it kind of makes for a fun night. And I have a little pile of napkins that have haiku written on them that someday maybe we'll publish in a book, a napkin book.
That's fantastic. And then it's dual use, right? It's art, and you can clean up the sweat from your cocktail on the bar.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, it was great to meet you this year. And how's your experience of SerlingFest 25 been?
I'm having a good time. I mean, it's I didn't know what to expect, and it's kind of fun to be in a group of people who have like interests, and I've found it inspiring, actually.
I have too. That's what's kept me coming back. Well, it's wonderful to meet you, and best of luck, and I can't wait to hear you play. So how can people find your band? How can they get more of what you're doing?
Best way probably is website, which is www.watkinsandtherapiers.com, all one word. So it's WATKINSANDTHERAPIERS.com.
Fantastic. One more time, and for the cheap seats.
WatkinsandTheRapiers.com.
In 2019, I had the pleasure of meeting the next interviewee. He's the author of the book Everything I Know I Learned in the Twilight Zone, and many other books too. His Columbo book is a personal favorite of mine, and he's also a board member of the Rod Serling Memorial Foundation and has appeared on stage at SerlingFest many times. So here's Chad's conversation with Mark DeWidziak.
Hi, Mark. Great to see you again.
Hey, Chad. How you doing?
Yes. So everything I learned from the Twilight Zone. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, we're sitting just a couple feet away from my daughter, and she was kind of the inspiration for the whole thing, is that she watched an awful lot of classic television when she was a kid. And when she was about to turn 15, I realized she hadn't really watched the Twilight Zone yet. So at one point I said, well, you kind of finished your undergraduate work in classic television. It's time for you to do your postgraduate work. It's time to get serious about this. It's time to enter the Twilight Zone. So we started a forced march through all 156 episodes. We started right with the pilot and went right on through. And we were watching like 2 or 3 a night. And we were in the first season. And we hit the episode Escape Clause with David Wayne as Walter Bedecker, the hypochondriac, and he wants immortality, and the devil appears with a contract, and this is not going to end well for David Wayne. But when it was over and it had run its course, I turned to Becky and jokingly said, let that be a lesson to you. Always read through contracts, read to look for loopholes. And we were joking around, and laughing about it. And then I kind of thought about 2008 and everybody who had signed contracts, which they didn't know what they were signing. And we got into the banking crisis because, as I'm apt to do, and it kept, after every episode, I'd say, let this be a lesson to you. And then finally I realized, well, this is your Twilight Zone book, stupid. You just have to extract these wonderful parables and these life lessons and these morality tales and to do the that's your book, is to every Twilight Zone was a morality tale. It was a life lesson. And so the title isn't really facetious. When I say everything I need to know I learned in the Twilight Zone, it is a wonderful guide for how you should live your life.
It absolutely is. Now, how easy or difficult was it to sell the idea of this book to the publisher? Were they receptive? Did you have to shop this around, or was this something that got...
It was just a matter of finding the right publisher, the right one. It did take a little while. My agent was very confident. She loved the idea right from the start. She thought this was going to be a very quick sale, and she actually ended up selling a couple other books for me. And I was almost thinking, well, maybe this one was not going to happen. When it happened, and she found the right one, which was St. Martin's. And St. Martin's, she found the right editor at St. Martin's who saw what the potential in this, and they went with it right away.
So for the listeners, let that be a lesson to you.
Oh yeah, persistence, and you never see it coming. It always comes out of right field. You plan things as a writer, and it's like every time somebody has said to me, what's your next book going to be? And I always say now, well, I could tell you what I think my next book is going to be, but the universe probably has other ideas. And I've never been right. In fact, when I published my first book in 1982, the next book I was going to write was going to be on the Twilight Zone. I wanted to do the history of the Twilight Zone. And of course, in 1982, Mark Scott Secree beat me to it. And as I've often said, I've said to Mark, I couldn't even get mad about it because he did such a great job. That book is a landmark book. It's still such a great book. He set the standard not only for research in the Twilight Zone, but for books on television shows. So I have to shift my focus. There again, I said it was going to be the Twilight Zone, so I shifted my focus to another favorite show, Columbo, and my idea was to do as good a book on Columbo as Mark had done on the Twilight Zone. But I always kind of felt I was owed a Twilight Zone book. That's foolish. You're not owed anything. But, the universe was smarter than I was. I wasn't ready to write that book yet. It wasn't until I started sharing the book with Becky that, this is the book. This is your Twilight Zone book. So often enough, the universe is smarter than you are.
Wonderful.
And you have to sort of understand. Stand back and you see the pattern. You see how the universe took me on a big circle to get me back to the Twilight Zone. And I didn't see that.
Any sort of surprises as you were working on the book and finding these life lessons? Anything that sort of surprised you or that you didn't expect that you...
Well, one of the things I did with the book was I solicited guest lessons for the book from Twilight Zone experts like Mark Scott Secree and Martin Grams and people who'd written books on the Twilight Zone. People who'd been in it. Robert Redford sent me a life lesson, Fritz Weaver, people who'd been in it. But I was surprised at some of the people who were Rod Serling and Twilight Zone fans. David Chase, who created The Sopranos. Rod Serling's his hero. I didn't know that. And The Twilight Zone's his favorite show of all time. I certainly didn't know that. And I'd done a book on The Night Stalker that David Chase was the story editor on, and I still didn't know that. So that was a surprise. Mel Brooks, his favorite show is The Twilight Zone. And, and I'm talking to him about something completely different, and I mentioned The Twilight Zone, and he says, that's my favorite show. And I said, can you give me a life lesson? He didn't even, it was like automatic. He didn't even stop to think. He just starts talking. It's right in the book, just as he said it then. Those were the surprises, was finding out just how many people have been influenced by the Twilight Zone. I had people who found out I was soliciting life lessons and came to me, like Neil deGrasse Tyson, who said, can I give you a life lesson? I didn't ask him. He found me.
Well, when you say the universe brings it to you, right? Neil deGrasse Tyson,
yes!
That's literally a physicist in a space, right?
Right.
That's amazing.
So, that was the surprises. The other thing was the book was such fun to write because it was like having a series of conversations with Twilight Zone fans. Each time I sat down to write a different essay, it was like 50 different conversations. So it was extraordinarily fun to write, you know.
And it's a memento of a family, right? It's life lessons in a
the
father
book's
and a
dedicated
daughter.
to Becky because you know it is, and you know, and another thing about writing books is that it often is you write the book, you put it out there, and then somebody else tells you what you did. I mean, in a specific sense, you know what you're writing, but there's always something that's in there subconsciously that you're not aware that you're doing because it comes out of who you are. And one of those things that happened on the book was I was doing a book talk on a little while after it came out, and the person said to me, "Oh, I love your book, and I love the whole father-daughter thing that's going on." I thought, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "You know, this whole thing." And then I of course, the book starts with the daughter and ends with the father. It starts because I shared the Twilight Zone with my daughter. It would not have happened if I had not done that. And the first thing in the book is the foreword by Anne Serling, the daughter. And the last life lesson in the book is something comes from a speech that Rod Serling gave at the University of Akron in 1971. So it begins with the daughter, it ends with the father. It began with my daughter, and the last thing in the book, of course, is the author's photo. So it ends with me, but who took the author's photo? My daughter.
Oh,
So I didn't see that. I didn't see that as a structure. I didn't see that as a, I just was writing the book because I thought I should write the book. But somebody else saw it and said, "Oh, you've got this whole lovely thing going on in this book."
wonderful. So we've got the origin story of your daughter's origin with Rod Serling and the Twilight Zone. How about yours? What was your sort of early inspiration or early
10
memories?
years old. I was not just not quite old enough to have experienced the Twilight Zone in its first run. But in the mid-'60s, right after it had gone off the air, a station in New York where I grew up, WPIX Channel 11, started to rerun the Twilight Zone. So it was on every day. That's when I started watching the Twilight Zone and fell under the spell. And I was already kind of a horror fan at that point. I became a horror fan about the age of 7. So I liked the Twilight Zone at 10 because of the spooky stories, that wonderful creepy feeling in the back of your neck at the end with the payoffs. That's why I love the Twilight Zone. When I became a teenager, I started to sense that there's something more going on behind all of this creepy stuff. And that's the wonderful thing about the Twilight Zone is you can take it through your whole life. And it starts to mean different things. You watch the same episode, and maybe you were just watching it for the creep-out factor when you were a kid. Then as a teenager, maybe you're responding to some of the themes in there. And then as an adult, you're responding to even more. So it's one of those shows you can carry through your whole life.
Wonderful. And before we leave, are you working on anything now that you'd like to give everyone a preview?
I'm on deadline right now for a book. 5 of my books are on Mark Twain, and this is going to be what I think will be my ultimate statement on Mark Twain. And it's going to basically be a book about how we need to be listening to Mark Twain now more than at any other point in our history, that we ignore him at our own peril. And that book is going to be done by St. Mars, same people who did the Twilight Zone book. That book is going to be done, and that should be out next year.
Wonderful. I'm looking forward to it. And it's great to speak with you. And I saw they have a Mark Twain play next door.
Richard Thomas is bringing, which is Hal Holbrook's show. He got permission to do Hal Holbrook's arrangement of stuff. And he's coming, and Hal played this theater. There's a poster backstage of Hal. When he was here. So.
Yes, and it's wonderful to be here, Rod Serling's hometown, and it's great to see you here at SerlingFest 25.
Okay, well, thank you for you got me on one of my favorite topics. So.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
One of the authors at the event this year was also there last time I attended with his book, The Twilight Rounds, in which he chronicles Rod Serling's love of the sport of boxing. But this year, a new edition has been published by Jobber House Press with a beautiful cover by artist Corin Shadme and a foreword by Anne Serling. And there will also be an upcoming audiobook version narrated by yours truly. So here's Christopher Benedict to tell us all about the Twilight Rounds.
All right, so and just talking with Nick Parisi, we talked about how Rod Serling was somewhat his own harshest critic. But Rod Serling was also, in addition to being his own worst critic, he was also very tough and very resilient. And those things were tested in the boxing ring of all places. Rod Serling had an extensive history with boxing, and I'm here with boxing expert and author Chris Benedict, who has written the Twilight Rounds. Chris, can you tell us a little bit about this book?
Sure. Well, first of all, expert's a word I kind of push back on a little bit. I'm a student, I think I would probably say. Expert implies that you know everything there is to know, and I certainly don't propound it, profess to know everything there is to know. But yeah, so basically my book comes from my love of both boxing and Rod Serling. And just when you think there's been so much written about Serling and that no more can be said, there are a lot of little niche areas of his personal life and his creative life that are ripe for examining, and boxing is certainly one of them. There was, even when I started out, there was much more than I knew originally. And so when I set out, I obviously knew Requiem for a Heavyweight, Big Tall Wish from the Twilight Zone. Had no idea that his first ever published piece of work appeared in his college literary magazine, which was a 4-page boxing story called The Good Right Hand. And that several more would appear in between then and even the Playhouse 90 version of Requiem in '56. So a lot of that, tried to fill in the gaps, and went into his boxing experience in the Army. And like you said, I think a lot of his mental fortitude came from his youthful physical aggression on the tennis court and in the boxing ring, and I think that definitely informed his mental toughness in dealing with his battles later on with the censors and sponsors who he had to go to battle with.
And if I'm not mistaken, he went right from high school into the military, right into World War II. Is that right?
Yeah.
So was his boxing experience in the ring, was in the Army? Is that right?
Well, interestingly enough, I was just speaking to a gentleman before our event, and he was telling me that Rod worked out at the YMCA, which I didn't even know about. That he boxed there along with some of the local guys, and that that he had taken an interest in boxing before the Army, and so in the Army to earn points and a little extra money, he would participate in the boxing tournaments that are organized by his general, and he competed in 17 successful bouts as a flyweight, which is about 112 pounds, which is pretty much what he weighed back then. Didn't end so successfully. His last fight was against for some reason, a 200-pound heavyweight, which I still can't fathom. He was knocked out cold, and that was basically the end of his personal boxing career. But set the stage for what would be a long-running theme throughout his writing work.
Well, a 90-pound weight difference. That seems.
Yeah, that's pretty. Well, here we are now. We have Jake Paul and Gervonta Davis set to take on. There's a 40-50 pound weight difference there. So I mean, it's crazy to think about, but yeah, it happens.
Wow. And Rod Serling, was there anything that you sort of were surprised by or discovered when you were doing the research? I mean, you just mentioned we learned something today, right? So the kind of thing you can only pick up when you're in the hometown at SerlingFest,
Right.
Local people who knew him and said, hey, he was actually trained in box at the YMCA. Was there anything you discovered in the research and in his writings that you didn't expect, or that sort of gave you a new insight?
I think just generally speaking, like I said, I was surprised by how much boxing themed work that he actually had produced, which I didn't know until I really started digging in and doing the research. And Nick's book obviously was very enlightening. So yeah, I mean, the fact that there was so much just prior to Requiem for a Heavyweight You could see, you could almost trace it backwards and see where he started and how everything progressed until he got to Requiem. So it was almost like he was honing the stories one by one and kind of shaping what would prove to be, even what he considered to be his, one of the most, honest and, great pieces that he ever did. It was something that he definitely considered one of the best things that he ever wrote.
And has that 4-page story, the first one ever, has that ever seen the light of day or seen any publication? Or
It hasn't. It hasn't been published since it first appeared in 1948. Yeah.
And do you have a sort of a favorite piece that he did in the boxing arena?
Boxing wise? Unfortunately, there are some scripts that are either considered lost or just haven't surfaced yet. Of the ones that are around now, I mean, the one that took the title of my book from, the Twilight Rounds, was an excellent one. Yeah, actually, that program does still exist. It's in the collection at the Paley Center, which is only viewable by appointment. And it made for a kind of serendipitous title to the book, in Twilight Rounds, and the connection to the Twilight Zone. So I would say that one. Someone asked me just before, about the different versions of Requiem, the Playhouse 90 and the film, and everybody kind of has their different opinions. I know Rod definitely preferred the Playhouse 90. For the most part, I agree. There are things I like about both of them, but I think the Playhouse 90 is the one I prefer the most.
Fantastic. And there's also sort of a through line of Rod Serling's work where he's always in touch with the humanity of the subjects, and particularly with boxing. The subtitle of your book is Rod Serling Explores the Dark Side of Boxing. Did you have some conflicted feelings about the sport and sort of the what happens to some of its participants and the industry itself? And how do you feel about that, his perspective on that?
Oh, 100%. I think that went through it for every facet of his life, but specific to boxing, I think he was very critical, and rightfully so, of the very unseemly elements of the sport, the corruption, and the way that the fighters are treated and misused. And because of that, I think he was very empathetic toward them as human beings, and that they were more than just chattel to cannon fodder to throw into the ring and for our amusement and entertainment. To them they were real flesh and blood human beings with feelings and dreams, and just like the rest of us. So I think that comes through in especially when you watch something like Requiem or The Big Tall Wish, when you see his portrayals of Mountain and Bowley. I think that really comes through, the humanity of the fighter, more so than just this beast that's going into the ring, trying to take somebody's head off.
And finally, your book has some heavyweight forwards by some very some big luminaries, both in the boxing world and in the Rod Serling work. Can you talk a little bit about those forwards?
Yeah, boy, I was thrilled that Anne Serling, obviously Rod's daughter, and who wrote a beautiful memoir about her dad, agreed to write a forward for the book, which I was over the moon about when she agreed to do that for me. And my best friend and favorite boxer, Lady Tiger, who was one of the first women to get her professional boxing license in the state of New York, and is a Hall of Famer. She was nice enough to take her time, to write me a very lovely foreword. And there's also an additional one by Melissa Smith, who is a good friend and a colleague, and has authored 2 books on the subject. Women's boxing historian, and I think it really adds to this new edition of the book. Gives the reader, a nice welcome to the new edition, and really sets the stage for what's to come. And I was very, very happy and very thankful for all the new contributions.
Well, this signing is sort of a celebration and a launch of the new book. Best of luck. It's a wonderful piece of work, and it's great to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chad.
Take care.
You too.
Now, this year's event was marked by many new presenters being at SerlingFest for the first time. And the gentleman that we'll be hearing from next was one of those presenters. His name is David Biancoli, who is an American TV critic and broadcaster. So let's hear what he has to say.
That's the greatest last name I've ever heard. Being cool.
Biancoli.
Being cool, but still.
Yeah,
being
cool.
Yeah,
That's what that was a high school. That was one of a yes.
Yeah.
Well,
Listen to
there
all
you
the
go.
time.
There you go.
Yes.
There you go. Yes, I am that one.
It's just we don't see you. You know, the radio.
I know it's a real disappointment, but what can I do? That's why I'm in radio.
That's why I'm in books.
Yeah,
You know,
see?
nobody sees me at
See?
all. Yeah.
See?
And they don't have to hear me either. But here they
There
gotta
we
hear
go.
me. Well, it's wonderful to meet you in person here at SerlingFest 2025.
You too.
And can you give us your comic book origin story of your connection to Serling and
Oh,
Twilight Zone?
there were two shows that I watched as a kid with my dad religiously each week. One was Twilight Zone, one was Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour a few years later. And both of those shows sort of made me want to be a television critic. So it's sort of my
career is sort of traced to the Twilight Zone.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And, any favorites? Any favorite episodes that really got you?
Oh, sure, but they've changed because I now teach it as I teach television studies, and so I pull out some obscure ones for the students and the things. But I remember vividly not seeing it coming. Eye of the Beholder. It's a very obvious one. And Time Enough at Last. So they're real standards. And Time Enough at Last, the older I've gotten, the less I'm satisfied with it. Because, it's like there had to be, an optometrist shop in that deserted place that he could have found glasses somehow. But the idea that everything was different, nothing was predictable, and you left with things to think about once you turned the TV set off. Whether Rod was writing the episodes or not, those were always presented that way.
And as much as television, as a television critic, as much as television has changed and evolved, I feel like Serling and the Twilight Zone was a real writer's show.
An absolute writer's show. The most recent book that I did, I interviewed a bunch of people whose television work I have admired, going all the way, like from the beginning with Carl Reiner and Mel Brooks to recently with Vince Gilligan and Aaron Sorkin. And the one show that more of them mentioned as having influenced them than any other was The Twilight Zone. It didn't matter whether they were doing drama or comedy or variety. The Twilight Zone, everybody seemed to really love.
Any insights that you got from those interviews that sort of surprised you or that stuck out, or were any of your...
Well, about the Twilight Zone or just about in general?
Oh, in general.
Well, it's amazing what inspires people to write specific stories, but also what inspires people to be writers. The Twilight Zone did that. Another show that did that, and until you think of it, you would never think of it. But the Dick Van Dyke Show, because it showed that you could be a writer for television. That was part of what that show was about. And a lot of people that I interviewed for the book said that they first thought of writing for television by watching Dick Van Dyke because it looked like so much fun.
Oh, that's amazing. Well,
So there you go.
There was a line last night that the sharp suit that Rod Serling wore, that was key because we thought, hey, we could make a living.
Yeah,
at this.
that was from Frank, wasn't it? From
Yeah.
Frank Spotnitz? Yes.
Spot is, yeah, he really gave us a bait and switch because I've done some writing and I've lost money, not made it. So I think he sold us a bill of goods on that suit.
And I've never seen Frank in a suit, so that's another thing. But but then again, Thoreau said, "Beware of all enterprises that require new clothes." So that works too.
Perfect. And was it one of the Marx brothers that said I would never belong to an organization that would have me as a member?
Yes, exactly.
Well, I belong to the Rod Serling Memorial Foundation. So there you go.
See, there you go. There you
Oh,
go.
wonderful. So are you working on anything new or anything?
Yeah, this'll not come out for a year or two, but my next project is I'm doing a book on the Beatles. Because the world needs another book on the Beatles. But my idea, it's called See the Beatles, and it's arguing that the visual things that they did, whether they did them themselves or they commissioned them and approved them, were just as iconic and groundbreaking and important as the music that they made. So you think of the album covers, you think of the videos, you think of the movies, you think of the TV appearances, you put it all together along with their lithographs, their photography, it's in the stage shows and the movies inspired by them. There's a lot. So that's the idea.
And they changed their whole look, right? From the suits to
Yes.
Sergeant Pepper's.
Yep.
And they sort of
predated Madonna in that constant evolution.
See, you're right in there with me. Yes.
Yeah,
So hopefully that'll work.
Did John Lennon ever wear a wedding dress and writhe around on the floor at the VMAs, or am I confusing?
Yes. No, that was. He did wear white, and he did do a wedding album, but it wasn't Madonna.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes.
So, what's been your experience with SerlingFest? Is this?
This is my first one.
Well,
I just love. I have such a passion for good television that to talk to anybody who has the same sort of passion and has it for a reason and has a good definition of good television, I'm thrilled to be among. So I feel like I found my people.
I felt the same way. My first one was 2019, and this is where those people are.
Wow. Well, thank you for talking to me on this one.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Great to meet you.
All right. Thanks. You too.
I've had the great pleasure of meeting the next interviewee a couple of times when I've been to SerlingFest. He is a prolific author, particularly in the area of crime investigation, and a personal friend of Rod Serling. And he's now a board member of the Rod Serling Memorial Foundation, and a really interesting man and a great speaker. His name is Mark Olshaker.
Hi, I'm here with Mark Olshaker. He has just gotten off the SerlingFest stage. Mark, can you tell us what you were presenting and introducing today?
Yeah, well, in 1968, January 15th to be specific, Rod gave a speech to the at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., which I attended. I'd been a friend of his for 3 years, even though I was only 17 years old at the time. And what he said about the responsibility of the writer in the 20th century applies equally well to the 21st century, if not more so. In fact, I would say chillingly so.
And there was a particular quote that you, quote that seemed to really resonate in your...
Yeah, I mean, Rod said, "The moment you censor the writer, and history bears this out in the ugliest of terms, so begins a process of decay in the body politic that ultimately leads to disaster. What starts with a blue pencil, for whatever reason, very often ends with a concentration camp. It has forever been thus, so long as men write what they think, write what they feel, then all of the other freedoms, all of them, may remain intact. And it is then that writing becomes a weapon of truth, an act of conscience, an article of faith." And I think those words that were said 57 years ago are as relevant today as ever, in fact, chillingly so.
Absolutely. And there was a remark that the blue pen was sort of the censoring.
Yes, blue pencil certainly represents censorship, but now we have probably more efficient ways of doing it. And the thing that's was brought up in our talk, Rod certainly was affected by censorship, but that was the censorship of the sponsors in those days. In fact, Rod said, "The writer must walk tiptoe and in agony, lest he offend some given cereal buyer in a given state below the Mason-Dixon." So now it's coming from the very top. It's the administration that's trying to censor anything they don't like. And we've seen this just this past week with the cancellation of the Jimmy Kimmel Show by ABC. You can agree or disagree with Jimmy. It doesn't matter. You don't censor writing. The whole point of the First Amendment is people get to say what they feel, and that will protect all the other freedoms. And so that's what Rod was talking about. And again, he was eerily prescient.
And he mentioned concentration camps, and we're
Sure.
actually seeing in real time.
Well, we are. And what's also very interesting is that he talked a lot and wrote a lot in the Twilight Zone about aliens, people from beings from outer space. And what do we have now? We have this war against aliens, anybody from outside our borders. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have border security, but we don't make a universal enemy out of the other. That's what Rod was talking about.
And one of my favorite Twilight Zone big finishes is people are alike all over. and where
Absolutely.
the viewer finds themselves in the position of the other, and gets it from the other side of the.
Right. And what's interesting, Rod told me once that of all the Twilight Zone episodes, the one that was mentioned to him as a favorite, or one that resonated the most times, by far, far and away from any other episode, was Eye of the Beholder, which any Twilight Zone aficionado knows is about a society in which everybody has to look the same because it's a threat if you don't. And at the end, it's revealed that everybody is grotesquely ugly except for the one patient of the episode, played by Donna Douglas, who is very beautiful, and she has to be banished to like a camp somewhere because she doesn't conform.
And you actually had a relationship with Rod Serling. You actually.
Yes, I did. I was very fortunate through a series of events. I got to meet him when I was 14 years old. He was already a great hero of mine, and he kind of befriended me, and we maintained a relationship, a close friendship, for the last 10 years of his life, from the time he was 40 till the time he was 50 and died, the time I was 14 till the time I was 24. He was amazingly supportive, generous to me, and certainly informed my career as a writer. And I think everything I've written over the last 50 years now has been in some way informed or inspired by Rod.
And so many of us have just sort of dreamed of what it would be like to know Rod Serling personally.
Absolutely. And I'll say one more thing, that as I set up on stage today, I come from the generation of the 60s, and we were a generation brought up to be idealistic enough to think that anything was possible, and yet cynical and skeptical enough to believe that nothing was true. And part of that was, the after effects of the John Kennedy's assassination in 1963. Part of that, I think, was the sensibility we got from the Twilight Zone, which made us think, which made us question. It didn't give us any answers, but it made us question and think about everything, about the everyday morality of life.
And there's a song by Living Color where they say everything is possible, but nothing is real, and I think that speaks exactly.
Very
to,
true.
to
Very
what
true.
You're saying. So, now, as far as how did your relationship with Serling impact your writing? I mean, you're obviously a prolific writer. Can you tell us?
Well, I've specialized primarily in criminal justice and public health, although I've written about a lot of other subjects. And I think just the sensibility I got from Rod, the sense that there is a moral center to everything, certainly has, I hope, informed my writing and my presentation.
Absolutely. And are you working on anything presently? Anything you'd like to?
Well, I've just published a book 2 weeks ago with Dr. Michael Osterholm of the University of Minnesota called The Big One: How We Must Prepare for Future Deadly Pandemics. And again, it's a book about public health and lessons we should have learned from COVID, and what we didn't realize when we were writing it, that it would be, in a sense, a direct challenge to the dismantlement of the public health system today under this administration. And we're trying to go for truth, for evidence, for responsible reporting. And I think that's what Rod was talking about when he said we should approach these things with at least a modicum of courage. I mean, the reason Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was confirmed as Secretary of Health and Human Services, I think, is because everybody fell in line in the Senate behind the president, and at least on the Republican side, and there was no courage.
And last night we screened On Thursday We Leave for Home, and that call and response seems to really speak to that.
You bet. I mean, 50 years after Rod died, he would be shocked at how relevant he is and what a presence he is still in American and world society.
And one of the tragedies is he really was his own harshest critic, as Parisi said.
Yes, he was. He didn't think that his work would last. What's interesting is a couple of years before he died, I approached him about writing a book about him and the origins and development of American television. And he said he would completely cooperate with me and, do whatever I wanted and probe his ever-diminishing memories, he said. But he warned me that he said, I think that publishers just won't be interested. There's not enough there, and you won't be able to sell it. And unfortunately, he was right about that too. My agent couldn't sell the book to any publishers, and I think Rod would be staggered now by how many books there are about him, how many good books there are about him and his work.
And it's amazing to be here and see an entire hall of books dedicated. Yes, and you've written about him yourself.
Yes, I've written about him in many ways, about the inspiration he gave me, and again, he's with us, and he couldn't be more relevant.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure to speak with you today. How can people keep up with you and keep up with your work?
Well, just go on Amazon or look me up on any of the web services, and you'll find Mark Olshaker. I think I'm the only one with that name.
Absolutely. And it's been a pleasure talking to you here from the Green Room, and Olshaker. That's an easy one to remember. Moving and shaking.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
To close out this episode, I'm going to play a conversation that Chad had with one of my favorite people that I've collaborated with on the Twilight Zone podcast. You will have heard her on the Planet of the Apes episode, the I Sing the Body Electric episode, and a couple of other ones too. Always a fascinating conversation when Amy Boyle Johnston is involved.
Hi, I'm here with Amy Boyle Johnston, author of Unknown Serling at SerlingFest 2025. How are you doing, Amy?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking.
Wonderful. So I was a big fan of your book, Unknown Serling. Can you tell us a little bit about that process and what that was like?
Unknown Serling Volume 1 is a first. It's probably going to end up being 2 volumes. I hoped it would be 3. The first volume is about Ray Bradbury, his service in the war, in a war game that he participated in, and a play he wrote later in life called The Killing Season. So it's different elements. I treated it episodically, just like the Twilight Zone was. So each one is independent of the other.
Oh, fantastic. And Serling's experience of the war really changed him, and a lot of the stuff about coming back home and not being able to come back home seems like it might have been from his war experience. Did you find that to be in your research?
Well, when I started to research Rod Serling and I realized the crux of his stories, a lot of it's centered around the war, a lot of the names he used, and I realized very quickly that in order to understand Serling, the war helped. I would joke that if I was writing about Paddy Chayefsky, I'd want to know about his dating life. But Rod Serling didn't write about home life. He didn't write about dating. He didn't write about personal relationships there. He really dealt with how do you live with yourself in society? How do you live in a culture where not everything is kind and just? And so that's why I never examined his home life. To me, it was not relevant to the stories of which he did. I chose purposely to write about Serling's career, not his life.
Wonderful. So now Volume 1 implies Volume 2. Is Volume 2 in the works?
Volume 2 is in the works. I am finally putting together. It's about the Twilight Zone and what it is, different stories leading up to the Twilight Zone. Some people may or may not agree with my analysis, but my rules are I will show you my primary documentation, and you can agree or disagree with me, but do not discount that I'm showing you the actual documentation. You can come to a different conclusion, and I believe you can say I'm wrong, but I will ask you why, but do not discount the primary documentation.
And so including that primary documentation is a solid grounds, right? I mean, here it is.
Yes, and some people will tell me why they think Twilight Zone came about, and I say, well, why do you believe that? And they say, well, it's in this book, and it's in this book, and it's in this book. And many stories, as we know, gets repeated, and I will say, show me the primary source, and it's a story. And so that's fine, but if I use primary documentation, and this just happens to be a story that was reprinted in a book and then reprinted, that's different. So you may or may not agree with me, but I will show you why I believe what I do. My undergraduate degree is in history, and my professors, 25 years later, remember I would read footnotes and I would question the footnotes, which, good or bad, it's just how I do.
Wonderful. And so what's the focus of Volume 2?
Volume 2 is dedicated to the Twilight Zone and Serling's work in fantasy. One of the things that upsets me is people say Serling only wrote fantasy because his realism was rejected. And that's just false. Serling wrote fantasy throughout his entire career, but when he was writing professionally, there weren't a lot of outlets for it. Serling wrote scripts for a lot of science fiction shows, but they weren't picked up. But Serling did write I'm not taking away his due, but Serling wrote fantasy in college. He wrote fantasy before Twilight Zone. He wrote fantasy but not everything was taken up. Serling was not a political writer until I would say the mid-50s. So a lot of his early fantasy is not as good as the later work, but hopefully as a writer you become better as you write and you age, which is true for Serling.
Wonderful. It seems like there's almost a sense of myth busting. Was there any kind of myth busting that surprised you, or something in your research that, you know?
What I don't like about the story that Serling didn't write fantasy before censorship is that people assume that he was hoodwinking the networks. If we can teach fifth graders and we show them Twilight Zone and they understand this is about racism and prejudice, the TV executives and the admin knew that in 1959 as well. I do not like the story that I have figured this out. Serling knew this, but no one in the TV industry did. The admin and CBS at the time was called the Tiffany Network. This was the most elite network on TV at a time when there were 3 channels. The president, Dr. Frankston, loved Rod Serling. Everyone knew this was about racism and so forth. And if it was coded, fine, it was coded. But I do not want to say that the admin and CBS did not know that these were political stories. They absolutely were. Because then we become the hero, when in fact Serling should be the hero of, he was told this is not commercially viable, and he did it. I think we need to return Serling to that.
And so there seems like there was an element of courage there in producing those stories.
Serling did have an element of courage to present those stories, but he also wrote over and over again that it was the duty of some writers to speak with a conscience, to stand up for your fellow man. He also wrote things that were not all political, he still said you have to entertain people. Not all of Serling's writings are political. They're compelling. I have read radio plays that were entertaining, that were fun. And I've read very heavy drama as well. And sometimes he says he was too heavy speaking rather than entertaining. Serling could do both. Serling as a writer was crisp. His dialogue is amazing. He believed in other writers. He supported other writers. And he wanted writers to have a sense of dignity in what they wrote. And so that is amazing, and that's Serling's whole career.
Wonderful. And I heard from the stage today in the presentation on the new documentary that Serling had a great sense of humor as well.
Serling absolutely was a great sense of humor. One of his great friends was Sammy Davis Jr., and there would be times when I would research that I would imagine Sammy Davis Jr., who was quick and fast and funny and hilarious and witty, and Rod Serling sitting in their basements drinking and laughing and storytelling. Serling absolutely had a sense of humor.
Wonderful. Yeah, and that's something that people don't always think about, because some of the material was so serious and of such importance and weight, but the fact that he had a sense of humor, and that, you know, comes through if you're looking for it. But
yes, and also Serling didn't write comedy. He did try comedy when he was at WLW. He wrote a series called Leave It to Kathy, and it was a comedy of 2 women that worked in a department store's complaint department. And I have almost the complete collection of Leave It to Kathy, and it is not remarkable. And he did not enjoy writing comedy. It was not his great thing, and that's fine. Not all writers can write all parts. Serling could write great dialogue between individuals representing each other, but comedy is not a strong suit of his, and that's okay.
And so you have the entire collection. Is any of that going to make its way into maybe Volume 3, or is there a plan for Volume 3? I know I don't want to get too far ahead of things.
Well, I don't know what's in Volume 3, if there will be a Volume 3. There are lots of writers out there that if you said they have a lot of their earlier work of a show that you did not want to write, would not like it. It has been donated to one archive, one of the Serling archives, but it's not memorable. Not all of us want other people to see our early work, but it is secure somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely, and the respect for that. Well, any good memories of SerlingFest 2025? How's this year been for you at the fest?
SerlingFest I look forward to. It's great to hear other people say this work matters to me as well. In a world where we are so divisive, where the world says this matters, it really does matter. The idea that we can sit together and celebrate a writer who would be 100 years old today is amazing, and that his work still resonates. And I still say what amazes me about Rod Serling is we can have conversations that we had with our parents, we can now have with our children.
Absolutely.
And if we don't have a solution to the problems, we can at least have a conversation.
Wonderful. It's an important insight, because when you mention the divisiveness, you have to be able to be in conversation. And I think he facilitated that. You can see every angle in his stories, every character's perspective.
Yes, and he wanted us to literally put ourselves, and he had written some earlier shows when he was still in Ohio where he said, this happens to you, what would you do? He wanted to engage the average person. He was not obsessed about power. He was driven by, how does someone respond to this? What do we do? Because power is dangling, but it's very few. It's what do we do about this? He was not selling a dream. He was making space.
And how has Rod Serling influenced you as a writer and as a professional and even as a person?
One of the things I admire about Rod Serling was he worked. He was always working, and he was always trying to make it better. And he also, if he made a mistake, he didn't say, oh, well, or make an excuse. He worked. And he was willing to do that. And I love it that I think we've lost part of that, where we can say, I made a mistake, let me try again. I can't do this, but I'm at least making an effort. When something got taken away or something got stripped, he goes, you at least need to do something. You know, you may not make it to the mountain, but you need to start walking to it. And Serling did believe that. Serling also could judge his work. When he received criticism, he responded to that. Jack Gould, who loved Rod Serling's work, Jack Gould of the New York Times, television critic, loved Rod Serling. They exchanged very few letters because that would not have been acceptable, but they both admired each other's work. Jack Gould wrote a criticism, one-part criticism, what was not the strong suit of Requiem for a Heavyweight, and Rod Serling never did it again. And he understood that this was a medium, this was a craft, and it was an art form. And in order to improve in your art form, you have to improve your craft. And Serling did that. Another thing I love about Serling is, even though so many Twilight Zones are so visual, they work as radio plays. One of the most profoundly visual things ever filmed for television is Eye of the Beholder, Twilight Zone episode, and it works as a radio play, which if you watch it, you think is bananas. And it's not. It's the dialogue. And in fact, the meaning of the play becomes clear. He could write dialogue like no other person I've ever read.
Amazing. And so you presented this year, correct?
Yes, I presented this year The Wrong End of the Banana, which was about Serling's work in The Other. And the reminder is, when it comes to the others, we are the other as well. We have to remember that when we view someone as the enemy, they may also be viewing us as the enemy. And Serling writes about that.
Oh, kind of reminiscent of People Are Alike all over, in a way, how at the end, you know, he is behind the bars.
Yes.
The protagonist, and
yes,
he is the other.
Yes, and it's also, if you look at the Kennedy administration and the Justice Department, and then later you have John Rawls wrote a book, I want to say 71 or 72, but the idea had been around for a while in the theory of the justice, which is when you write a law or regulation, do not look at it from the advantage point of you are the person in power. Look at it from, it was called the original position. When this law is written, you do not know where you will enter. You do not know how this law will affect you. So imagine any law or regulation. And if you do this, how is this going to impact me? And that was one of the themes of the Kennedy administration. That was of the economic policies. And in many ways, it's an embracement of what if this was on the other foot? And Serling embraced that.
Wow. And how can people keep up with you and your work?
I am hit or miss. I am on social media. My day job is I'm a researcher, and I've done the work on the research. I have not done any new research on Serling. I went to over 30 archives. I went to 3 readings of the 511th. I'm no longer doing research. I just need to write. But like many people, I have many hats. And Serling, I'm trying to finish the writing because it feels like the moment has passed already for me when it comes to that.
Well, I'm a fan of your work. I've got your book, and I can say I'm looking forward to it whenever the time comes.
Thank you. And that will be out within a year. But it's just putting together and finalizing another way of looking at the Twilight Zone. History, I was always told that the past has certain traces and is often forgotten. History is contemporary thinking of the past. So you and I may have a different way of looking at history. It is not the past. And so I have a different point of view than you may have a point of view. So you may or may not agree with my analysis, but I will show you why. I will show you my work of how I got there. And the only thing I ask people is, if you're going to disagree with any assessment I ever make, as long as you show me how you analyze there, we can both be correct. It is not that I'm right and you're wrong. And I think we need to return to that. We can have a different viewpoint. It's when we disagree about facts that is upsetting. But someone may like Charles Dickens and someone may not. It does not mean one person is wrong or right. It's a preference. But when it comes to analysis, that really is, as long as you can show why it is, you can see 2 different points of view. Hopefully 2 or 3. And I think we need to remember that. I do not like anyone who analyzes certain literature and says this is the one way it is, because that never stands up. The moment you make it rigid, you're allowing it to be broken. So I can openly say, I will show you how it is, but I also admit I could be wrong, but this is how I got there. You are free to add to this. And I just find it amazing when people say, well, this is what I've been told. And I go, yes, and here's a different way of looking at it.
Yeah, and I think in today's environment, everybody's opinion seems to... Some people think that their opinion carries the weight of research, right? Because I can express an opinion publicly, that means I'm true, or my opinion is just as on the same footing as an expert's opinion. And I think that discipline of research that you're talking about and showing the work is especially important today.
Yes, and I'm also amazed at how many people tell me stories about Serling or Twilight Zone, and I go, that's just not factually correct. I have met many people who tell me that Walking Distance was filmed in Binghamton, and I just say it's not, and people look at me and go, no, I was told it is, and I go, I stopped engaging because they're fixated on that, and it's just not accurate, and that can be looked up. That is an actual fact, but the idea that, well, I think this, you think this, I will ask you how you arrived to a conclusion, and I believed a lot of things I was told about Rod Serling in his writings, but once I started to research, I went, oh, here's another clue. And we are storytellers, so that we tell stories about a storyteller. It makes absolute sense. But until someone goes through all this research, you don't know. So anything I've ever said professionally about Rod Serling, I would say it to him. I've said it to Anne, I've said it in writing. And I'm not trying to impress anyone. I'm just trying to say, let's actually have a conversation and say, is this a different viewpoint? And I think it's wrong. Well, I don't like saying wrong. I get upset when someone says I have a theory, and this is not science, this is not speed, this is not engineering. If someone says I have a theory and they express why, and someone just says, well, I believe something else, and I go, well, you can believe that, but it's not the same weight. If I show you my math, you have to include my math. You can have your own theory, but once I've shown you evidence that differs, you now have to reincorporate what I've introduced to that conversation. So it's don't be dismissive of that.
Absolutely.
But most people are open to that. But it's also don't be a jerk. So I think a little bit differently, and I understand why you think that way, but here's a way to look at it. And it's a conversation. It is not a competition. It is a conversation. And I don't want to experience competition with people. And if I feel like it's a competition, I'll just bow out. I go, it's here, take it or leave it. But it doesn't detract from the truth. It doesn't detract from the evidence. I hope that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely, it does. Yeah, and I think it's important. And it's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I really enjoyed this conversation. And if I'd like to say hello to Tom. They were recording this for him across
hi,
the pond.
Tom.
So.
One of my fellow train fun people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tom and I talked about trains.
Yeah, he regrets that he couldn't be here this year, so we're getting some audio for him. And
he's one of my favorite people to talk to. Yeah. Smooth voice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amy. Great.
So I hope you enjoyed that taste of SerlingFest. We'll leave it there for this episode, but do join me next time for more conversations from Binghamton, including one with the man who is bringing the new Rod Serling documentary to our screens in the not too distant future. I will speak to you then.